Chapter 15. Less than 60 seconds after she'd come through the front door at Bruce Lucent and Callie Archer's wedding reception, Yvonne Perrin knew she was in trouble.
Hey there, how's my very favoritist bridesmaid?
Yvonne Perrin looked around just in time to dodge a beefy-faced and obviously drunk man who was trying to kiss her.
I'm not.
You remember me? I'm Uncle Roger, he said. I was at the rehearsal dinner.
He tottered slightly, then pulled a mashed-looking disposable camera out of his pocket.
Let's get one of these nice people to take our picture together, huh?
She knew how that would work. He'd get his arm around her for a good long grope and a couple of wet kisses, while some other hapless guest took forever to figure out the camera's dead simple controls. She privately vowed that if she couldn't get out of it, she was going to do the whole thing with a lovely smile on her face and one of her spike heels planted squarely in the middle of Uncle Roger's foot. Mercifully, the little cell phone in her handbag chose that moment to start ringing. She transferred the bag to her Uncle Roger side hand, made an apologetic "just a sec" face, and flipped open the phone. "Maria Lisa," said an unfamiliar voice. Yvonne beamed.
Hi, honey. I've been looking for you too.
"Maria, estás?" The guy on the phone sounded urgent. That was probably why he dialed the wrong number. "Estoy en mi casa. Necesito ir a mi trabajo."
They are, right now.
Yvonne turned and made a quick,
"This is going to take a teeny bit longer."
gesture to Uncle Roger, then went back to the call.
Tell them to wait and I'll be right there.
"Por favor, Maria. Estoy muy tarde para mi trabajo."
Sweetie, where are you? I'm right by the front door.
Yvonne stood on tiptoe and scanned the room, looking for a good escape route. The big arched doorway over to her right looked promising.
Just tell me which way to go, and I'll be there quick as a bunny,
she told the guy. He let out a furious burst of idiomatic Spanish and hung up hard.
Thanks, honey. I'll be right there,
she caroled, and snapped the phone shut.
Gotta run,
she told Uncle Roger, and took off through the crowd. She should have known, Yvonne reflected bitterly. God knows Callie had emailed her enough pictures while the wedding was in its planning stages. Trouble was, she'd never been able to get the attachment to open. They were bin hexed or something like that. Probably. Virus. But even without seeing the pictures, it should have occurred to her that if anyone in the world were capable of picking out non-sucky bridesmaids' dresses, it was Callie. And so she'd discovered when she arrived at the church and gotten a glimpse of them. They weren't sucky at all. Not the problem.
Oh, Lord,
she'd said out loud.
It's practically the same dress and hat.
She'd had just enough time to dash back to her car to grab a lightweight shawl she'd providentially left lying on the back seat 2 weeks earlier. Then come back and find an out-of-the-way seat at the rear of the church. During the ceremony, who'd be looking at her? Anyway, but that wasn't going to work during the reception. At close range, the shawl just looked tatty, and when she was standing up, it did nothing to camouflage the rest of her gown, so distinctive, with its subtly off-shade organza overdress that looked like absolutely nothing else being worn at the party, except by the bridesmaids, of course. Sometimes life is just not fair.
I don't care!
A few minutes later, Yvonne found what she needed, an out-of-the-way dressing area with a good mirror in the pool house way over on the other side of the grounds. It wasn't exactly private, but it was around 3 corners from the pool house entrance, and the pool house itself was reassuringly dark inside.
No, it's dark.
Besides, with all the guests still up in the main house doing their initial meet, greet, and congratulate, she had the place to herself. She switched on the overhead lights directly above the mirror and took a long, hard look at her dress. Would the organza come off without leaving the underdress in rags? It seemed a shame to remove it. She'd loved this dress, but consoled herself with the thought that if 6 other women in their social circle had the exact same thing hanging in their closets, she'd never have been able to wear it anyway. Yvonne unzipped the dress to her waist and took down her bodice so she could look at its construction. She was in luck. There, underneath the facing, was a neat little row of hand-set stitches, fastening the overdress to the underlying material. It must have been designed to be removable all along. She rummaged in her purse for the ornate little silver pocket knife she'd inherited from her grandmother, then went to work, ripping stitches. The front came away easily, and the back was nearly as quick. That left the waist. She looked around, sighed, shrugged, and peeled her dress off entirely. When she was done, she bundled up the remains and put her dress back on to see what she had.
Nice dress, that's for sure,
she said aloud to the mirror. It was still pretty, but now it showed far more skin, and with the organza draping gone, she'd had to forego her bra and its attached slip. She shimmied her shoulders experimentally and watched the effect. She didn't quite fall out. The matching organza sun hat would have to go as well. Before, it had matched the dress perfectly. Now all it matched was the oddly forlorn-looking roll of fabric she'd tucked safely away on a high shelf. Yvonne started carefully removing the hat pins that had secured the hat to her elaborate hairdo. The minute the hat was off, her glossy red hair came tumbling down around her back and shoulders. Yvonne sighed in exasperation. In this humidity, she could see it was already starting to curl. She twisted the unruly red hank into a loose knot at the nape of her neck, tying it off with the hatband and cluster of silk flowers from her cast-off hat.
Very nice,
a male voice said lazily from somewhere behind her.
It says a lot for a dress that I don't mind seeing and put it back on.
Yvonne gasped and whirled around, looking for the source of the voice, while she groped behind her for her long hat pins.
"Oh, sorry,"
said the voice. There was the ratcheting click of a Zippo lighter, and in the brief flare of its light she saw an older man in formal wear sitting in an ornate high-backed wicker armchair. Then the lighter clicked shut, and all she could see in the shadows was the red glow at the end of his cigarillo.
How long have you...
she began, then stopped.
I'd have had you come in.
I'm afraid so,
he said.
I'll have to beg your pardon. I had just finished making a phone call when you walked in.
In the dark?
In the night. In the dark.
She said.
Not too dark to make a phone call. You're blinded by those overheads.
Inside her head, an inane little voice was busily calculating.
I had the slip on when I took the dress off. I put the dress back on over the slip. I pulled the slip off of my head while I still had the dress on. He didn't see much.
Another voice was saying,
From where? He's either a guest or he's an employee who has something to lose. Still not safe, but maybe I'll be okay. Keep him talking. Where's my knife? Where's my phone?
And something that wasn't exactly a voice was thinking something like,
I expect you're right.
She walked over to the switch plate and turned on the rest of the boom lights. The mysterious man in the chair now looked less mysterious, but perhaps more intriguing. Wide shoulders, narrow waist, a ruddy complexion, not young, but neither afraid of nor defeated by his age. He looked, she suddenly thought, like a man who was lightly sparring with his age and enjoying the fight.
I don't understand what you're saying.
His suit was perfectly tailored.
He never entered that suit,
she thought.
Not with his build.
She approved of both. The man returned her attention, studying her as she did him. He looked pleased. Yvonne felt herself blushing, and the vexations and frantic pace of the day evaporating as though they'd never happened. She was in her 30s, her girlhood long behind her, and she'd never lacked for male companionship. But she suddenly felt that little pleasurable dizziness of the dance beginning again, as always feeling like it was the first time in the history of the world.
The nice thing about being in your 30s,
she reflected,
is that you can appreciate that feeling for what it's worth. And not worry about what it isn't.
But what on earth does that mean?
I don't know.
Then memory kicked in.
Richard Isaacs,
She said,
I've met you. One of Bruce Lucent's parties.
His smile widened. Yvonne, he said, I didn't catch the rest of your name. It was noisy. You were wearing green silk, the exact shade of the philodendron hanging behind you. She laughed then, feeling absurdly flattered, and walked across the room to offer him her hand.
How do you do?
She said.
I'm pleased to finally make your acquaintance.
He took her hand and held it lightly in his own for a few seconds. I'm afraid I really am going to have to ask you for your forgiveness, he said. I should have said something when you came in, but I didn't. And after that, I was fascinated.
I'm fascinated too. Right on the arm.
I had no idea that women were capable of transformation on such short notice.
You mean my dress? I had to. I was ambushed.
What kind of ambush makes you take your dress apart? As Yvonne walked back to the narrow shelf in front of the mirror to collect her bits of belongings and stow them back her purse, she said,
I cleverly deduced that you weren't at the wedding ceremony.
You are correct. What did I miss?
Bridesmaids. 6 of them. Every one of them wearing the same dress and hat.
His jaw dropped. My God, isn't there some kind of law against that? Bridesmaids aren't supposed to dress like human beings.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Yvonne said.
But Callie picked them out.
He shook his head, and then a thought struck him, and he began to laugh. Yvonne watched, feeling a little wary.
Sure?
She asked. I was just thinking that you're being terribly brave. My first wife once wore the same dress worn by just one other woman at a party, and she sulked about it for a week and a half if she'd arrived to find 6 other women wearing her dress.
Spontaneous human combustion,
Yvonne said solemnly.
I'd always wondered what caused it.
Then a brief silence fell between them, and she found herself wondering self-consciously whether she was keeping him from the party. Just as she was wondering whether she should say something about it, he said, This is lovely, and so are you. But I should ask whether I'm keeping you from the party.
Oh,
She said, at once relieved and afraid. She looked too relieved.
I was about to ask you the same. I have no obligations besides attending, and if I know Bruce and Callie, this party will run through tomorrow morning. How about you?
I'm here for the party. I do have one other item on my agenda, which is to try to have a conversation with a former business associate of one of my former business associates. He grimaced. A man named Roger. I don't know his last name. I'm supposed to recognize him from an old snapshot they found in the files.
If it's the Uncle Roger I met as soon as I came in the door, you're too late.
He's left already?
He's 3 sheets to the wind. That was the other reason I came back here and started hacking my dress apart.
Richard studied her bare shoulders. And this is supposed to discourage him.
It's supposed to put a crimp in any further rounds of, Hey, sweetheart, didn't I meet you at the rehearsal dinner?
Ah, he said. Now I understand. You took off your uniform and buried it.
Exactly. I'm a non-combatant. Now shall I take a look at this snapshot of yours? I think I'd recognize him if I saw him.
Richard shook his head. I left it behind. He picked up a cane she hadn't noticed he was carrying and got up out of his chair. He was moving a little stiffly.
I don't remember that from the party,
Yvonne said.
When were you hurt?
An auto accident. Nothing worth mentioning. I'll get over it. I just haven't yet.
He limped over to what Yvonne had taken for a section of wall.
Could you turn out the lights? There now. Good.
Isn't it bright in here?
This is a louvered window. You can see most of the yard from here. Tell me if you can spot Uncle Roger.
Richard started turning the crank that would open the louvers, and Yvonne came and stood beside him. She abruptly realized she was close enough to smell him. A good smell, hard work, and clean skin, and a hint of old spice. And to feel the slight radiant warmth of his body. There, in the darkness. There was a single sharp knock in her chest, as though her sternum had been kicked from the inside, and for a moment she closed her eyes and fought to keep her balance. Her heart was hammering so hard that she thought he must surely be able to hear it.
There,
he said, and she blinked and shook her head a little, trying to clear it. Outside the louvered window, the late afternoon was turning into early evening. The lamps strung up around the yard made little pools of light in the dusk, and partygoers clustered underneath them. Richard was right. You could see everything from here. She looked carefully, mentally dividing up the area and thoroughly scanning one section before moving on to the next, and...
There.
You can see him?
Yes.
She glanced up at Richard. He was staring out the window, his eyes fixed on some object. She turned back to the scene.
Medium blue suit, going bald. Over there, next to the woman in the red kaftan and all the gold beads. See? That man who keeps bouncing up on his toes when he talks.
Him, yes. I'd already thought so from seeing you that picture. If he told you his name's Roger, I'd say that just about settles it.
He watched a little longer.
Definitely too drunk to talk to.
Then he turned to face her, and once more she could feel her heart hammering. She paused a moment, listening. There was a second sound mixed in with it.
I can hear your heart beating,
she whispered, and impulsively laid her hand on his chest. He put his arms around her and pulled her close, and then they kissed. And for a while the rest of the universe went away. When they broke off their kiss, the way he looked down at her was like someone reading, and he looked at her for a long time.
As a matter of fact, no, he said conversationally. I don't do this sort of thing often.
He kissed her again.
And neither do you, he added.
Thank you,
Yvonne said.
I was about to say something stupider than that. What do you want to do?
A lot of things. Take my hand. You really can't see in the dark, can you? There's a door over in the corner. It has a lock on it.
And on the other side of it?
A big lumpy old sofa and a dead TV set. And something even better.
What's that?
She said, feeling for the wall. She heard the door open somewhere in front of her.
A fuse box switch that'll turn off the power to the whole poorhouse. Nobody will come bothering us if they have to make their way through a couple of unlit rooms to do it.
Oh, you are clever,
she said.
Are you sure you haven't done this before?
I'm sure. It's the sheer inspiration that's making me ingenious.
A long time later, he shifted position, kissed her neck in the air, and murmured,
I lied.
I lied.
Past perfect subjunctive,
she said sleepily.
What did you lie about?
The not doing this very often part.
Already having some doubts about that?
Shucks, ma'am. That weren't nothing. He ran his finger slowly up the inside of her thigh, starting from her knee, and smiled in satisfaction to feel her spine arch backward and hear her long, soft gasp as she inhaled. "What I meant to say," he continued, "is that I'm not really committed to that interactive model."
Is that so?
She squirmed slightly to get better leverage, then wrapped one leg around his waist and tucked her heel into the small of his back.
I think I can live with that.
Georgia on my mind.
Thanks to everyone for watching this. Big thanks to my Patreon supporters. Big thanks to Break System BSC and Michael Maris. And a special apology to Riley Hoyle-Dodson, whose name I misspelled last time. If you liked this video, comment on it. If you comment on this video, subscribe. And if you subscribe, be sure to like this video. Oh, and anyone who's at Con Bravo this weekend, say hi if you see me. My terrifying floaty skull.